Dear God, we pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts would be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Talking about wheat and weeds, or in the old language, wheat and tares, which is what that ancient weed was called. It's also known as darnel. Darnel. Interesting plant compared to wheat. When one sprouts beside a wheat sprout, it looks just like it. When it grows into a plant, it looks pretty much just like it. I think if you look closely, you could tell the difference. When you have a lot of them growing together closely, it's quite a chore, I've heard, to sort them out. And if you uproot one, you may uproot the other. I suppose this was a familiar phenomenon to farmers in Jesus' time. To look at a field of wheat, and it's full of weeds too. What to do about it? Well, the weeds take the nutrients from the wheat. So any good gardener knows you should keep a clean and tidy garden patch. So the workers wanted to take the weeds out of the wheat. But the farmer said, no, if you do that, you'll ruin the crop, you'll uproot the wheat too. Here's what you do. You let them all grow together. There's nothing to be done until harvest time. Because when the seeds are in the head, then you can tell the difference more easily. So the reapers then would sort the unpalatable tare or darnel heads from the good wheat heads that were gone to make bread. And the weeds would then be burned up and disposed of. So this is the parable. It's a story about life and the paradox of it. And to me, it feels so very, very familiar. That there is so much wheat in the world, there is so much beauty and so much good in the world and in our own human nature. But there's also a lot of danger. There is evil in the world. And if we look in the mirror and think about ourselves, we're just like a combination of wheat and tares too. Well, I should speak for myself. I know I am. I've got my good nature and I've got my sinful nature, so I'm very much like that too, and it's all mixed up together. And how in the world do you sort it out? When we ourselves are like that wheat thing, made a good and beautiful thing, but tainted by our moral failures. So I propose to you that this parable is a very apt description of life as we experience it. Question comes in the story. Well, this is the way the world is. Whose fault is it? Who's to blame? In the parable, some unnamed rascal of a neighbor has walked out behind the sower of the good seeds and thrown tare seeds all over in the wheat field. This implies that there is some malevolent, mischievous will in the reality that we experience. A good story reference for this, which I suspect you might be familiar with, is way back in the beginning of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, one of the very first stories, talking about the creation of a beautiful world and a garden with a man and a woman in it who are innocent, and the garden is full of everything they need. It's a paradise. There's only one thing they should not do, and that is to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And of course, we know the story. The serpent comes and beguiles Eve, who then tastes the fruit and then convinces Adam to taste it. And suddenly they look at themselves, they realize that they don't have any clothes on, they hide in the bushes in the garden, and God comes and says, hey, where are you? We're hiding because we're naked. Well, who told you you were naked? You got into the tree, didn't you? And Adam said, well, yeah, but it was her fault. And the woman says, yeah, but it's the servant's fault. Well, who's to blame? In that story, everyone's to blame. Everybody. And that's a story about us and our weakness as well. So Adam and Eve are cast from the garden, but they're provided with clothing and a means to make their living, and life will be hard, but they're still cared for. And so that also is an apt description of life as we experience it. Sometimes we think about that serpent who started all the nonsense. Well, how did the serpent get in the garden? Wasn't God responsible for that? What was a serpent anyway? In the original story, the serpent is a beautiful creature, and you would be beguiled by it. Sometimes in later interpretations, we think, well, that's the devil, that's Satan, but that's a different manifestation of this entity of malevolence that enters the world. Sometimes we read these stories and others in the Bible, and we assume that the Bible tells us that evil and good are locked in this kind of Star Wars battle. You know, the dark force and the good force are locked together. The Bible doesn't really teach that, though. This is not something that we should hold in our minds, that evil is as strong as good, and there's this endless conflict going on. It oversimplifies some of our notions about what the Bible teaches. I've been taught, and I choose to continue to believe, that the idea that God and the devil or Satan and evil are evenly matched is just bad theology. That is just bad theology. I'll take an amen anytime. Thank you. I had the blessing in undergraduate school of sitting in lecture classes by a wonderful, energetic Korean professor named Dr. Thompson-Aue. He taught Old Testament with passion. In our study of the book of Job, where the Satan adversary entity comes in, he was very passionate to tell us that this is not dualism. It's about other things, but it's not the idea that God and the Satan are equally matched. And he said it like this: if you pitted God against the devil, it would be like a tank, military tank versus a Volkswagen. No contest. There is no contest. This is an important component of the gospel message as well, the Christian message. If we hold in our beliefs and in our story that Jesus overcame evil and death and all of those things by his suffering and death and resurrection, then we must hold and believe still that the force of good and love and grace in the world is stronger by far than the force of any kind of evil in us or in the world. Now, naturally, don't we wish that the world was better? Don't we wish all of the bad things would go away, and only good and life and generosity and grace and peace and love? You know, we look around, we have the resources to have a paradise on earth, but human will and issues and disasters and things always get in the way, so we're always struggling. The world is this mixed up place. Don't we wish that it was better? As much good as there is, there always seems that there's always as much bad as well. There does seem to be this conflict ongoing. So how do we cope with this? If we were the farmers that day, or the servants of the master who owned the field, we might say, you know, can't we do something about this? We're willing to try. Set us to work in that field. We will pick through it. We will pick out the tares. We will save the wheat and get rid of the bad stuff. But the master says, that's great, but that's beyond you. Because if you did that, you would destroy the good stuff too. You have to wait until the harvest. Someone who has a different job than you is going to sort this out. And Jesus interprets this as saying that in the end, yes, all the bad is going to be gotten rid of. There will only be good left over. The righteous will shine like the sun. All the bad stuff will be gone. But that is not your job, because you can't do it. So what are we to do? Let the weeds and the wheat grow together. Tend the wheat. Tend the wheat. You know it's there. You might inadvertently feed the tares too. But God is generous, who sends rain upon the just and the unjust. Do good. That's our job. Focus on what you can do. John Wesley had this idea. He taught this. And this is hanging in our church office. If you ever want to go see it, if you're ever in there making copies, look up to your right. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can. So Methodists get this. This is what we are called to do, and that's what we're doing today and at Christmas time. Good, as much as we can, to as many as we can, in all the ways that we can. Early Methodists started a movement with this philosophy, and they transformed the society around them in the name of Christ. We still have that opportunity. And that sums up my interpretation of the text today. Fairly easy application. Don't get hung up on the philosophical and theological questions. Somebody else will figure that out. Do what you can do. Do good. Live generously. It's written all over our fronts today. That's the message. I want to finish with this reading of one of my favorite pieces of writing. It's written by Dr. Kent M. Keith and was quoted by Mother Teresa in some other applications. It's called The Paradoxical Commandments. The paradoxical commandments applied to a paradoxical world. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish and ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today might be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest ideas. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. When what you spend years building could well be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but they might attack you if you do help them. Help them anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you might get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have,